You know that feeling when you're scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning and you suddenly realize you spent 3 hours looking at videos, checking emails, responding to messages, and honestly just wasting time without even realizing it happened? There's something insidious about that moment of self-awareness when you realize that entire chunk of your evening just evaporated and you have absolutely nothing to show for it. My name is Lenny, and I spend way too much time thinking about behavioral patterns, how people sabotage themselves without even knowing it, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck repeating the same financial disasters year after year. If you're someone who genuinely wants to understand the hidden habits that are costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, instead of just accepting that money is complicated and you're bad with it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it resonates with what you're about to learn. Now, before we dive into what this silent habit actually is and how it's destroying your financial future, let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. What is the one thing you spend the most time on every single day that doesn't generate any income, doesn't improve your skills, doesn't strengthen your relationships, and doesn't make you healthier or happier? For most people, the answer is scrolling. We're talking about the endless cycle of checking social media, watching random videos, reading articles about things that don't matter, and consuming content that was specifically designed by teams of engineers to hijack your attention and keep you coming back for more. Think about it this way: if you're spending 2 hours per day on social media, which is actually the global average according to recent studies, you're dedicating roughly 730 hours every single year to content consumption that generates zero financial return for you. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what most people completely miss. It's not just the time itself that's the problem. The real damage happens because of what that scrolling is preventing you from doing instead. Every hour you spend scrolling is an hour you're not spending developing skills that could increase your income. Every hour you're watching someone else's life play out on a screen is an hour you're not spending planning your financial future or strategizing about wealth building. Every hour you're consuming content designed to make you feel incomplete is an hour you're not spending on personal development or focused work that moves you toward your goals. This is where the math gets absolutely brutal. Let's say you're 25 years old and you're currently scrolling for 2 hours every single day. Over your 40-year working career, that adds up to 29,200 hours of lost productive time. Now, let's convert that into money. If you're earning $30 per hour, which is a pretty reasonable assumption, that's roughly $876,000 in lost income generating potential. But that number actually undersells the real damage, because we're not even accounting for the compound effect of not developing new skills, not building your network, and not creating income streams that could have exponentially increased your earning potential. The real cost could easily be in the millions of dollars when you factor in all the opportunities you missed and all the advancement you didn't achieve because you were too busy scrolling through content that somebody else created. Now, you might be thinking that scrolling is really about procrastination, or just needing a mental break. And while there's some truth to that, the real mechanism of damage is far more sinister. Scrolling is a habit that trains your brain to have poor impulse control and terrible focus. When you spend hours every day switching between different apps, different videos, different posts, you're literally rewiring your brain to become worse at sustained concentration. Neuroscience research shows that heavy social media users have measurably worse attention spans and lower scores on cognitive tasks that require sustained focus. Your brain is becoming literally weaker at the one skill that matters most for building wealth, which is the ability to focus deeply on important tasks for extended periods of time. And here's the part that will probably frustrate you because it hits at something uncomfortable. The scrolling habit isn't just destroying your wealth, it's also destroying your decision-making ability. When you're constantly distracted and your brain is fragmented across multiple sources of information and stimulation, your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and good decision-making, is essentially offline. You're operating from the more primitive parts of your brain that are driven by immediate gratification and emotional impulses. This is why people who spend hours scrolling through social media are more likely to make terrible financial decisions. They're impulse buying things they see advertised while scrolling. They're making emotional decisions about money based on what they see other people posting about. They're falling into get-rich-quick schemes because their brain isn't in the state of mind to evaluate whether something is actually a good opportunity or just sophisticated marketing designed to part them from their money. The scrolling habit literally paralyzes the cognitive machinery you need to build wealth. But wait, there's more, because the damage doesn't stop at just time loss and reduced cognitive function. Scrolling is creating a psychological pattern that's fundamentally incompatible with wealth building. Every time you open an app and mindlessly scroll, you're training your brain to seek instant gratification. You get a little hit of dopamine when you see something interesting or when you get a like or a comment on something you posted. This trains your nervous system to crave constant stimulation and constant rewards. And here's the part that's really important. Wealth building requires the exact opposite psychological pattern. Building wealth requires the ability to delay gratification, to work on something for months or years without immediate rewards, to make disciplined choices even when they're boring and unglamorous. When your brain is conditioned to seek instant gratification through scrolling, it becomes almost impossible to do the slow, methodical work of investing, saving, and building passive income streams. Your brain literally becomes incompatible with the psychological patterns required for financial success. The comparison trap is another insidious component of the scrolling habit that's destroying your net worth in ways you probably don't even realize. Social media is specifically designed to show you the highlight reels of other people's lives. You're seeing vacation photos, not the credit card debt that funded them. You're seeing promotion announcements, not the years of struggle and setbacks. You're seeing luxury purchases, not the financial stress and sleepless nights that often come with overextending yourself. But your brain doesn't process it that way. Your brain sees these highlight reels and immediately triggers a comparison response. You start thinking that everyone else is doing better than you, that you're falling behind, that you're somehow failing. This comparison mechanism activates a stress response in your body that actually makes you worse at making smart financial decisions. When you're stressed and feeling inadequate, you're more likely to make emotional purchases trying to feel better. You're more likely to go into debt trying to keep up with what you think other people have. You're more likely to abandon your long-term wealth building plan because it feels like you're already too far behind. The scrolling habit is literally training you to self-sabotage your financial future through comparison and emotional reactivity. Now, let me share something that will probably surprise you about the economics of the scrolling habit that most people never think about. Every minute you spend scrolling, the social media platform you're on is making money. Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube are some of the most profitable companies in the world, precisely because they've turned human attention into an incredibly valuable commodity. Advertisers are paying tens of thousands of dollars per video to get in front of you while you're scrolling. They're using sophisticated psychological techniques to make you want to buy things, and they're incredibly good at their job. Which means when you're scrolling, you're not just wasting time, you're also being bombarded with sophisticated marketing messages designed specifically to make you spend money you probably don't have on things you probably don't need. The data shows that heavy social media users spend significantly more money on impulse purchases, subscription services, and consumer goods than people who use social media less frequently. The companies that are manipulating your attention while you scroll are directly profiting from your poverty. They're making money off your lack of financial discipline. They're getting rich by training your brain to spend instead of save, to consume instead of create, to want instead of think. This is the part that makes most people uncomfortable because it means admitting that you've been playing a game that was rigged against you from the start. But here's what's encouraging. Once you understand the mechanism, you can actually change it. The scrolling habit might be destroying your net worth, but it's still just a habit, which means it can be broken or at least dramatically reduced with the right approach. Let me tell you what happens to your income potential once you break free from the scrolling addiction, because this is where things get really interesting. When you reclaim those 2 hours per day that you were spending scrolling, you now have 730 hours per year to spend on something that actually matters. Even if you just spend half of that time developing a new skill or working on a side project that could generate additional income, you're looking at 365 hours per year of focused, productive work. Now, different skills generate different levels of income, but let's say you use that time to develop a skill that could eventually generate an extra $10 per hour. That's an additional $3,650 per year. Over a 40-year career, that's a $146,000 increase in lifetime earnings. But the math gets exponentially more interesting if you use that time to develop a skill that could generate a side income stream. What if you spent that reclaimed time building a business or creating something that could generate an extra $500 per month? That's $6,000 per year. Over 40 years, that's $240,000 before we even account for growth or scaling or the increased business value over time. And what if that side income eventually grows and scales? What if 3 years of consistent work on that business results in something that generates $2,000 per month, which then stays relatively stable for the remaining 37 years of your career? Now we're talking about an additional $888,000 in income from something you built by reclaiming the time you were wasting on scrolling. The financial opportunity cost of this one habit is absolutely staggering when you really think about it. What if 3 years of consistent work on that business results in something that generates $2,000 per month, which then stays relatively stable for the remaining 37 years of your career? Now we're talking about an additional $888,000 in income from something you built by reclaiming the time you were wasting on scrolling. The financial opportunity cost of this one habit is absolutely staggering when you really think about it. But the damage doesn't stop at just lost income. The scrolling habit is also directly impacting your ability to make good financial decisions about the money you do earn. Studies show that people who scroll heavily before making financial decisions are more likely to make poor choices. The constant stream of advertising and the dopamine hits from social media leave your prefrontal cortex exhausted, which means when you sit down to actually think about investing, retirement planning, or major purchases, you're operating at a cognitive disadvantage. You're not in the optimal mental state for making good decisions. You're tired, you're depleted, and your willpower is already drained. This is why so many people scroll through social media right before bed, and then the next day they make terrible financial decisions. Their brain is already in a weakened state from the previous evening's scrolling marathon. The scrolling habit is essentially pre-sabotaging your financial decision-making process. Now here's something else that most people completely miss about how the scrolling habit destroys wealth. And this has to do with opportunity cost in a very concrete sense. When you're scrolling through content created by other people, you're not developing the skills to create something yourself. You're not building a personal brand. You're not putting yourself in a position where you could turn your skills and experience into a product or service that other people would pay for. You're consuming instead of creating. And here's the brutal truth. In today's economy, the wealth is being created by the creators, not the consumers. The YouTubers making millions of dollars aren't doing it by watching other people's videos. The entrepreneurs building successful businesses aren't doing it by scrolling through social media, hoping to find inspiration. The people building real wealth are the ones who stopped consuming and started creating. But it's really hard to break free from consuming and start creating when you've trained your brain to seek instant gratification through scrolling. Your brain has been conditioned to expect constant entertainment and constant stimulation. The idea of sitting down and doing focused, difficult work, especially when there are no immediate rewards, feels boring and painful by comparison. This is why the scrolling habit is so insidious. It doesn't just cost you time and money directly. It also prevents you from developing the psychological resilience and the entrepreneurial skills that are essential for building significant wealth. You're not just losing money in terms of lost income and impulse purchases. You're losing the opportunity to become the type of person who builds wealth instead of the type of person who consumes it. Let me talk about what actually happens in your brain when you break the scrolling habit, because this is where things get really encouraging. The first few days after you stop scrolling heavily are going to feel uncomfortable. Your brain is going to crave that stimulation that you've been training it to expect. You're going to feel bored and you're going to feel itchy, like something is missing. This is actually a positive sign because it means your dopamine system is recalibrating. You've been running it at a very high stimulation level and it needs time to reset to baseline. But here's what happens after about 2 to 3 weeks. Your attention span starts improving noticeably. You're able to concentrate for longer periods without getting distracted. You're able to read a full article or watch a full video without feeling the urge to switch to something else. Your cognitive function improves in measurable ways. And then something really interesting happens at about the 1 month mark. You start noticing opportunities and problems that you were completely blind to when you were scrolling all the time. You're suddenly seeing patterns in your life, in your financial situation, in your relationships. You're getting ideas for how you could improve things. You're thinking more strategically about your career and your finances. This is what it looks like when your brain actually has the mental space to think clearly and engage in high-level strategic thinking. Now let's talk about the specific financial impact that breaking the scrolling habit can have on your wealth trajectory. Let's say you're currently scrolling for 2 hours per day and you're spending about $200 per month on impulse purchases that are at least partially driven by what you see while scrolling. That's $2,400 per year in unnecessary spending. Just by breaking the scrolling habit, you could eliminate that $2,400 in wasteful spending. Over 40 years, assuming that money gets invested and compounds at 8% annually, that's $1.2 million in lost wealth from just the impulse purchases. But now add in the income you're missing from the time you're not investing in developing your skills and your side business. Add in the better financial decisions you're making because your brain isn't depleted from scrolling. Add in the opportunities you notice and pursue because you actually have the mental bandwidth to think strategically. Now we're talking about potentially several $1,000,000 in lost wealth over a 40-year period as a direct result of the scrolling habit. This is not hyperbole. This is just basic math applied to the opportunity costs of a single bad habit. Now, I want to be really clear about something because I know some people are going to hear what I'm saying and think I'm being extreme or judgmental. I'm not saying that all social media is inherently evil or that you should never watch videos or consume content online. What I'm saying is that for the vast majority of people, the amount of time they spend scrolling is completely disproportionate to any actual value they're getting from it. You could probably spend 15 minutes per day on social media, stay connected with your friends, stay up to date with relevant information, and get all of the legitimate benefits of these platforms without falling into the consumption trap that destroys wealth. The problem is that these platforms are engineered to make 15 minutes turn into 2 hours. They're literally designed by people whose job it is to make the platform as addictive as possible. So the question isn't whether you should ever use social media. The question is whether you're going to be in control of your social media use or whether you're going to let social media be in control of you. And for most people, social media is currently in control. Here's what I want you to do right now to break the scrolling habit and start reclaiming control of your financial future. The first step is to actually measure how much time you're spending scrolling. Most phones now have screen time features that show you exactly how much time you're spending on each app. Go look at that number right now. Don't look away. Really understand the magnitude of the time you're wasting. Write it down. Let it sink in. Because once you really understand the scope of the problem, you're much more likely to actually do something about it. The second step is to use what I call friction-based defense. Make scrolling more difficult, not by requiring the willpower to resist, but by actually making the behavior harder to perform. Delete the apps from your phone so you can't scroll as easily. You can still use the mobile web versions if you need to, but having to open a browser is enough friction to break the automatic habit. Use app blockers that prevent you from opening certain apps during work hours. Leave your phone in another room while you're working. These aren't willpower strategies. These are environment design strategies. You're making it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing. The third step is to deliberately replace the scrolling time with something productive. Don't just eliminate the behavior and leave a void. You need to give your brain something else to do. Some people use the reclaimed time to exercise, some use it to learn new skills, some use it to work on side projects. The specific activity matters less than the fact that you're deliberately choosing to spend that time on something that matters to you. And here's the really important part. This is the point where the habit is truly broken. But here's what most people don't realize about breaking the scrolling habit, and this might be the most important insight in this entire video. When you break the scrolling habit, you're not just reclaiming time and protecting your brain from distraction. you're also fundamentally changing the way you see yourself and your potential. When you're scrolling all the time, you're in a consumer mindset. You're seeing yourself as someone who consumes content, who watches other people succeed, who buys things. When you break the scrolling habit and fill that time with creative or productive work, you're shifting into a creator mindset. You're seeing yourself as someone who creates things, who builds things, who generates value. This identity shift is incredibly powerful because your actions follow your identity. When you see yourself as a creator, you naturally start making decisions that a creator would make. You start investing in your skills. You start building things. You start looking for opportunities to create value. And here's the part where it connects back to wealth building. Wealthy people have a creator identity. They see themselves as people who create value and who get compensated for that value. Poor people have a consumer identity. They see themselves as people who consume what others create. The scrolling habit isn't just destroying your net worth through lost time and impulse purchases. It's also preventing you from developing the identity that's absolutely essential for building wealth. When you break the scrolling habit, you're not just changing a behavior, you're actually beginning to transform your entire identity. And that transformation is what leads to sustainable wealth building over time. Now, let me give you one more perspective that might shift how you think about this entire issue. Imagine that breaking the scrolling habit could guarantee that you would build an additional $1 million in wealth over your lifetime. That's not an exaggeration. That's just the math when you add up all the components. The time you reclaim, the impulse purchases you avoid, the income you generate from using that time productively, the better financial decisions you make, the side businesses you build, the opportunities you notice and pursue, all of that adds up to something that could realistically be worth well over $1 million. Now, if I told you that there was a supplement you could take that would increase your wealth by $1 million over your lifetime, you would probably think I was lying, because no single supplement is that powerful. But the scrolling habit is that powerful in the opposite direction. It's one of the most expensive habits you can possibly have, not in terms of direct cost, but in terms of opportunity cost. It's quietly, silently destroying your net worth while you're distracted watching someone else's life on a screen. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Are you going to keep scrolling and hoping that somehow you'll eventually build wealth? Or are you going to break free from this habit that's been systematically dismantling your financial future and actually take control of your destiny? The choice is yours, but understand that every day you wait is costing you thousands of dollars in lost opportunities and lost potential. Your future self is counting on the decision you make right now. Break the scrolling habit, reclaim your time, build your wealth, and most importantly, build your identity as a creator instead of a consumer. Trust me, your future self will thank you for it.